Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Welcome to the webinar. We're delighted to have you join us today for Doing Business in Latin America. And with that, it's my pleasure to introduce our panelist for today's webinar. Based in South Florida, Rich De La Rosa is a Director of Advisory Services at Radius and serves as lead advisor to many of our clients with operations throughout Latin America. After starting his career over 15 years ago at KPMG Tax, Rich began developing his experience in Latin America working with corporate finance for Viacom's MTV networks. Apart from the predominant markets covered in today's broadcast, Rich's assignments at Radius have covered many other Latin American and Caribbean territories, including Costa Rica, Guatemala, Panama, Peru, and Puerto Rico. Over to you, Rich.
Thank you, Ed, for that kind introduction. First, I wanted to start with a snapshot of really the three countries that we're going to be looking at today. And I refer to them as the new big three because last year Colombia replaced Argentina as the third largest economy in Latin America. Now, these are shown here in no particular order, but Brazil is still the largest economy, followed by Mexico, and Colombia is now third. As I mentioned, Argentina used to be third, and it's no headlines, the economic turmoil that they've been facing over the last 10 plus years. I did add Peru here as a fourth highlight, only to illustrate that they are currently considered the darlings of Latin America because of their aggressive growth both last year and projections for the next 2 years. The relative size of their economy, though, still has limits the amount of foreign direct investment that they get. But their growth is fueled mostly by mining exports, copper being the predominant one, and as well as a soaring popularity as a gastronomic tourist destination, where about 40% of tourists nowadays travel to Peru for that reason. And on average, they spend about $130 a day on food. I did want to mention Paraguay. If any of you have done any research lately on Latin American economies, you might have come across Paraguay as as leading the way as far as growth rate. In 2013, they had a 13% growth rate in GDP, and it was really an outlier due mostly to a rebound from a severe agricultural drought in the previous year. But technically in 2013, they were the fastest growing economy in Latin America and actually number 3 in the world. Next slide, please, Ed. Speaking of World Cup, I thought I'd break the ice a little. Short of embedding a live feed of the Uruguay game, I want to just add a little fun fact here for each country. Brazil leads all countries with 5 World Cup titles and is the only country to have appeared in every World Cup. Next slide, please. So first I wanted to discuss entity options in Brazil. And, we'll cover the 3 of them, but it for the most part, boils down to one option in almost every case with foreign companies expanding into Brazil. Branches are extremely burdensome to set up. They require a presidential decree, and you get the inherent situation where liability extends back to the parent. SAs, or stock corporations, you typically see those for large cap and publicly traded companies on the Brazilian stock exchange. They're more common than branches among foreign investors, but they entail costly setup requirements that are complex and publications of setup documentations and annual financial statements in the official gazette. However, as I mentioned, they're the only entity whereby stock can be publicly traded on the Brazilian stock exchange.